Whistle while you work.
From Disney on March 21st, the magical tale
Snow White.
Snow White?
Snow White.
that started it all
I believe you're looking for me.
arrives in theaters.
Magic mirror on the wall.
Experience the Disney classic
Who's the fairest one of all?
like never before.
We haven't even been introduced yet.
Disney Snow White, only in theaters March 21st. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested.
DirecTV is a better way to watch whatever you want to watch. We all know the frustration and confusion that comes from endlessly scrolling, trying to find your favorite shows. DirecTV brings together your live TV and apps into one home screen, helping you avoid the hassle of plugging in passwords again and again or wasting time searching for what to watch across platforms. With DirecTV, you spend more time watching and less time searching for your show. Sign up for DirecTV today at directtv.com.
If you can learn to be happy during an incredibly stressful time, it will serve you for the rest of your life. And I actually start with this idea that happiness is a moral obligation. It's actually an ethical issue. And I can guarantee you when I was growing up, that idea was nowhere to be found.
Hi, I'm Rachel, and in this show, we talk about everything: life and work, health and healing, relationships with others and with ourselves. These are stories for the seekers. These are conversations for the curious. This is the Rachel Hollis Podcast. Hi guys, it's Rach. Welcome to another episode in our Mastermind series. Today is all about the future of health and longevity. And in today's Mastermind episode, we're bringing you the most powerful, eye-opening insights from past conversations I've had with some of the leading experts in brain health, longevity, and holistic wellness. We've gathered the best moments from my interviews with these four brilliant minds who are redefining what it means to live longer, feel better, and stay sharp at every age. In this episode, you'll hear from Dr. Daniel Amen. So Dr. Amen is my brain doctor. He's worked with my husband, and most recently, Amen clinics have even worked with my kids, so allowing me to understand how their brains work. Well, today we're going to hear why brain health is so important and how small changes can protect your mind as you age. You're also going to hear from Dave Asprey, the father of biohacking, who is sharing cutting-edge strategies to increase your energy and optimize your performance. You'll also hear from Dr. Robynne Chutkan, a gut health expert. We're talking all about the microbiome, and something you might not know is how important the microbiome, your stomach lining, is to your overall immunity. Like, how healthy are you and how well you can keep yourself from getting sick. Last, you're going to hear from Dr. Chris Palmer on the groundbreaking connection between mental health and metabolic health. This conversation blew my mind. Most specifically, why your diet might be affecting your brain more than you realize. So, I hope you'll stick around and get all of this juicy information. And as always, if you find it helpful, I hope you'll consider sharing it with a friend.
If you can learn to be happy during an incredibly stressful time, it will serve you for the rest of your life. And I actually start with this idea that happiness is a moral obligation. It's actually an ethical issue. And I can guarantee you when I was growing up, that idea was nowhere to be found. But if you think about it, ask anybody who is raised by an unhappy parent or married to an unhappy spouse, whether or not happiness is an ethical issue. And I'm pretty sure they will say yes because of how we influence other people. And then I talk about the lies of happiness. And you've probably experienced some in your own life, like, I need more of something, right? When you're an internationally best-selling author, and both of us have been, it's like, well, the next one better be as good. And if it's not, you get unhappy because there's a part of your brain called the nucleus accumbens that respond to the happiness chemicals like dopamine. And more, unfortunately, won't make you happy. That's actually a lie, that you need to be happy with the journey rather than the outcome of the journey. So more is a lie. Don't worry, be happy is a complete lie. Those are the people who die early from accidents and preventable illnesses because they don't make good decisions. All of our decisions, if you want to be happy, you want to be happy now and later versus now but not later. And vodka, for example, is now but not later. And brain health is now and later. Or, the marketing messages of happiness, like open happiness is Coca-Cola's slogan. And open happiness is a lie. It's open illness. It's open diabetes. It's open obesity. It's open cancer. Soft drinks have been associated with virtually every bad illness humans can have. Happy meals are, in fact, not happy meals. They're sad meals because they're pro-inflammatory and they're not good for children. Or I need more money to be happy. And there is a correlation with happiness and money up to about $75,000. And then there's no correlation at all. And so more sex, more money, more relationships, those are the lies of happiness. Your brain is so powerful at making things happen. But if you don't tell it what you want, it'll make things happen that you don't want. And, it'll get thrown around by the tech company's desires for your money. And so on one piece of paper, write down what do you want in your relationships. And I start there purposefully because connections make people happy and disconnections make people crazy. It's very common to read about a murder-suicide in the paper. But the things that make people the unhappiest is when they get unplugged to people they care about. And so what do you want in your relationships with your spouse or your partner, with your children, with your extended family, with your friends? What do you want? What do you want at work? Because that's important. What do you want with your money? And then you start making much better decisions with your money when you know what you want. What do you want for your physical health, your emotional health, and your spiritual health, which most psychiatrists would never touch. But I just think it's central to happiness, to have a sense of why you're on the planet, what is your deepest sense of purpose. And then when you write it, and I don't want you to write a lot, because I want you to be able to look at it every day. And then the question, each of these 7 secrets have questions. The question is, does it fit? Does my behavior fit the goals I have for my life? So does it fit with my wife, with my children, with work? Because too many people like me, without balance, get burned out, get divorced, and become really unhappy because I'm driven, right? I mean, I have a big work goal. I want to change how psychiatric medicine is practiced, end mental illness, and create a revolution in brain health. So I could spend all of my time doing that, but then end up disconnected either from my loved ones or my health and end up pretty unhappy. But I think this balance is crucial if you want to be in the race for a long time, right? I mean, that goes with happiness, is I'm moving this thing along. One of the exercises in the book is write down 20 of the happiest moments of your life. And when you get sad, you can consciously get happy. And there's another exercise I like. So take those 20 moments and peg them to certain places in your house. So, for example, when I get to the front door, I peg getting married to Tana, and I'm holding her, and I almost trip at the front door. And it reminds me of when we were doing our practice for the dance, the wedding dance the night before. I dipped her and tripped and almost dropped her. And it was hysterical, right? Nobody got hurt. But it was just this really fun, intimate moment. And every time I go to the front door, I think about that. Or when I go to the kitchen, I see my grandfather at the stove. He was a candy maker. I mean, that was his job. And it was, and we're making chocolate, but Brain MD, my company, makes brain healthy chocolate. We're making it in a healthy way, but it's still that very deep connection of love for me. And, you know, I have these just strewn around the house of these great memories. And that way it helps me manage my mind. Because if you do something big that's, you know, different than other people, you're going to get your share of critics. And I know both of us have had them. And you have to strengthen yourself against them, and mental discipline is just a critical part of that process.
The Rachel Hollis Podcast is proudly sponsored by Amica Insurance. As Amica says, empathy is our best policy. That's why they'll go above and beyond to tailor your insurance coverage to best fit your needs. Whether you're on the road, at home, or traveling along life's journey, their friendly and knowledgeable representatives will work with you to ensure that you have the right coverage in place. Amica will provide you with peace of mind. Go to amica.com to get a quote today.
Whistle while you work.
From Disney on March 21st, the magical tale
Snow White.
Snow White?
Snow White.
that started it all
I believe you're looking for me.
arrives in theaters.
Magic mirror on the wall.
Experience the Disney classic
Who's the fairest one of all?
like never before.
We haven't even been introduced yet.
Disney Snow White, only in theaters March 21st. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested.
Along the way, I said, I'm going to lose this weight. It's the most important thing ever. I don't want to have another knee surgery because I'm too heavy to move around effectively. So I worked out 6 days a week, an hour and a half a day, half weights, half cardio. And I did this for 18 months straight on a low-fat, low-calorie diet. Now, at the end of this, I had a 46-inch waist, the same as I did before. I'm a 33-inch now. Okay, what did I gain during that time? I could max out all but 2 of the machines at the gym. My sleep wasn't good. My testosterone, even though, let's see, I measured it about a year or 2 later, it was lower than my mom's testosterone. I know, because we actually had her data from the same doctor.
Wow.
I'm like, this is a problem. And I was getting sick all the time before I started working out. That didn't get any better. I would just get, sinus infections all the time. And I learned that overtraining is a thing. And I fast forward to the work I've done with Bulletproof, and I've coached women and men, oftentimes very senior executives, people who are doing big things in the world. And it's almost like if you're going to go start a company and you're going to make it big, you're also going to run the Kona Ironman triathlon, and you're going to work out for an hour a day, right? And you're going to fly to Japan. We don't have to worry about that right now, but you're going to do something that's bad for your sleep and your circadian rhythm. And I can just stop someone there. And if it's a woman, it usually hits a woman first. And after, or even if they're saying, I'm going to go keto, right? I'm like, no, don't. I did that too. And I burned myself out that way. You can dip into ketosis and it's very good for you. And that's what my first book was about, how to do that in an effective way. And actually, it was my second book. My first book was on pregnancy and fertility. But the thing that's happening now, especially with long distance running, which is really rough, is that it can affect your cortisol levels and that can affect the rest of your hormones. So when someone says, all right, I'm going to use exercise as a coping mechanism, you get an opiate rush from that, but then you got to recover more. And sometimes recovering more means exercising every other day. And the research on minimal effective dose of exercise says that if you want your mitochondria, these power plants in your cells, to be effective and to grow, you need 20 minutes of moving every day. This is going for a walk, right? And then once or twice a week, you need to do something that makes you want to cry or throw up and do it for 15 minutes. Okay. Now,
That's awesome.
That's not going to be
direction.
enough for you because you want more than that. But if that's the low end, the high end where it starts not being good for you, it sounds like you might be hitting it. So the first thing you want to do is know when to exercise. So for me, after years of just intuiting this, I became very quantitative. And for almost 15 years, I've monitored my sleep quality. Now I use a ring. It's called the Oura Ring. And just full disclosure, I'm not trying to sell it. I am an investor in the company because I was CTO of a competitor to them that we sold for $100 million. So I know the space really well. The reason I like this, Rachel, is I wake up in the morning and it gives me a readiness score that's based on how my heart beats. Not how fast it beats, but little variations in it. That is a strong signal to say, today is a day to go hard or today is a day to go to yoga. Right? You can still exercise, right? But if you know I'm strong today, then you push. And if you know today's a recovery day, then you do the restful types of recovery. And this is to the point, I started a company called Upgrade Labs, which is meant to almost replace gyms, although you can still go work out however you want, but it's to recover faster than you're supposed to. And we've got things like cryotherapy and red light therapy and stuff like that. Because for me to run, not just, I mean, you're one of the few people who understands what it's like. Like I have 200 million downloads on my podcast, and it's top 100, and I write books about the same schedule as you do, and you know how draining it can be to just get all that out of you onto words.
Right.
And I'm also CEO of multiple companies, and I was CEO of Bulletproof for a long time before I hired a CEO, and that's a giant company, at least by my standards now, lots of zeros in its revenues. So I was overtraining my brain. And then I'd say, I'm going to go exercise. And I just realized, look, some days I don't have it. And it's okay. And it's such an act of kindness to say today, even though part of me wants to exercise and go hard because it's going to let that stress out, I know that if I do that, it's actually going to take away from my mental state and from my happiness state. Last year, I was in Men's Health magazine. And it wasn't just like in it, there was an 8-page spread or some multiple pages anyway. And they showed up to do the shoot. And if you're going to have your shirt off in a men's magazine, there's a recipe for that. And it involves taking diuretics and fasting for a couple of days.
And
so you're
dehydrating,
like lean and ripped.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't do any of that, and I'm not going to take my shirt off because I'm not the shirts off kind of guy. There's lots of actors who do that. I'm the New York Times says I'm almost muscular. I'm like, great, that's the people who live the longest. I'm okay with that, right?
That's funny.
To me, that was an awesome comment to them. I think it was meant to be a neg, but I'm like, no, I'm going to own that. And anyhow, they're like, oh, well, take your shirt off in your cryotherapy chamber. I'm like, I am not going to do this. Like, that is stupid. And they're like, no, just try it. If you don't like it, we have to do it. So I took my shirt off and there I am. And I have abs. Okay. They just grow naturally. I don't aim for abs. But if you look closely, you can see my stretch marks in Men's Health magazine on the side of my abs. And those are kind of like battle scars for why I do what I do. And I still have people say, Dave, you're such a liar. You didn't weigh 300 pounds. And I'm like, screw you. Like, I'm very certain I did weigh 300 pounds.
Yeah.
Right. And you get these haters like you're lying. When you're testing out your diet and you ate 4,500 calories a day and still lost weight, that's not possible. Therefore, it didn't happen. And those words I said, that's not possible. Therefore, it isn't. That's a story we tell ourselves, and science says it. You have to eat a certain way. You have to eat low fat. You have to do all these things or it can't work. Well, I did what's supposed to work and I stayed fat. That working out an hour and a half a day, 6 days a week for 18 months and still weighing 300 pounds. That kind of a thing, it made me think I was a bad person. It made me think I was a moral failure, that I was eating too much lettuce. I'm sitting at Carl's Jr. and my friends are eating double Western bacon cheeseburgers, and I'm having the chicken salad with no dressing and no chicken. And it's because I'm eating too much lettuce, right? So eventually I ran into that, and I just didn't want others to run into the same thing. And tied up in all this, Rachel, and this is probably more true for women than for men if you just look at the data, is there's a component of loneliness in eating. And for me, I was afraid. I didn't know I was afraid, but I was afraid of being alone. And I knew that if I didn't eat 6 meals a day, I'd go into starvation mode and I'd get fatter because someone told me that and I believed the story. So part of my path is I went into the desert with a shaman. She dropped me off in a cave outside Sedona. No one's around for 10 miles and I've got no food. And I fasted for 4 days in a cave so I could face loneliness and hunger and see that I wouldn't die. And I wrote a book about that. It's called Fast This Way. It's just coming out, fastthisway.com. And the whole book is narrated. This is what it's like to decide to walk out in the desert. This is the emotional side of it. This is what happens when you don't eat. And what I've learned over 10 years of putting intermittent fasting on the map as a part of my work. I mean, you do it. You mentioned you're doing bulletproof coffee and intermittent fasting. There are haters who say, you can't drink coffee that has fat in it and still be fasting. I'm like, well, the evidence and the people who've lost 1 million pounds on my diet might disagree with you.
Right.
But what ends up happening is you can say, I'm going to fast because it'll make me live longer, and I'm going to do it with zero pain because I used a little bit of fat or a little bit of a certain kind of prebiotic fiber. These are the hacks in the book to take away the pain. If you're a busy mom or a busy dad, maybe you didn't want to feel the full weight of your fast, but you wanted to feel good. And then maybe you wait till the weekend and you do what I call a spiritual fast in the book, which is where, I'm going to just feel the fear that's in my body. Okay, newsflash, you won't die if you don't eat for 60 days. You just feel like you're going to die. That story isn't real. And so I wanted to unpack it. Here's how to do a mindfulness fast. And here's how to do a daily practice that doesn't cost you anything and gives you more than you put into it. And that's what I learned over the last 10 years of fasting, but it started in a cave so I could face that. It's okay to be alone. It's okay to not have any food. You're not going to die even though you think you will. Well, your brain uses somewhere around 20% of your energy, and sometimes more, sometimes less. But it's interesting. The neurons in your brain, the parts that do the thinking, they are desperate for more energy. They have more of these little power plants, the mitochondria in them, than almost any other cells in the body, except in women, in your ovaries, you have 100,000 mitochondria per cell. And otherwise, your neurons in the brain have 15,000 mitochondria per cell on average. And the rest of you has 1,000. So this is where the good stuff happens, and the body's equipped you to do that. And they're desperate for energy, and they're telling you, could you get me some sugar? Unless you've done a little bit of fasting and you've trained them to burn fat. And when they can burn fat, you go into this mild state of ketosis. Funny enough, when you drink that bulletproof coffee that has the MCT oil in it, MCT oil turns into ketones, even if you haven't been fasting or you're not doing keto and all that kind of stuff. And then the neurons are like, wait a minute, if I burn a ketone, I get more electrons than if I burn sugar. And they will actually burn fat even if there's sugar present. And you feel this extra power boost that comes from that. But if at the same time, instead of doing that in the morning, you said, I'm going to have even a bowl of healthy oatmeal, which is all carbs anyway, then okay, we can burn the carbs. We just burn them with less energy. And if you fast and you don't have anything, all the energy that goes into digesting food, which is a huge amount of creating enzymes in the pancreas and the liver, all of that energy doesn't have anywhere else to go. So the body says, maybe I should clean up some dead cells while I'm at it. Maybe I should grow new cells while I'm at it. I'll fold some proteins over here. And it's a time of regeneration. And because when it's doing that, it raises ketones, it increases that fullness hormone, CCK, and it drops the hunger hormone called ghrelin. So all of a sudden, if you do this right, at 10 a.m. when you would normally reach for the bagel or the muffin, like that's the snack time. If someone puts even a donut in front of you, you just look at it and you're like, I'm really not hungry. Okay.
Right.
No willpower required. So when I was heavy, I remember they would bring like a plate of cookies in or one of these things in meetings in like at big companies. And you're sitting there in a meeting, just looking at it and it's like, eat me. And you go, no. And he goes, eat me. No. And pretty soon it's like a voice shouting in your head. And eventually, just like with a 2-year-old, you're like, okay, I'll just eat half. And then after the meeting, I'm like, I told myself I wasn't going to eat a cookie today. And I ate half a cookie. What's wrong with me? Well, nothing's wrong with me. It's because I ran out of electrons for willpower. And my body is like, eat that, eat that. But if you turn off the signal, Rachel, then the freedom comes because it's not even a choice. Like, I just don't want it. Instead of telling yourself you don't want to want it. They're so different and it's so liberating. That was why I wrote my whole diet book, was to turn that on for people. And when you're not having food in your stomach, all the kryptonite foods, the foods that cause inflammation and cravings, those aren't present. But then the body can actually get down to work on itself instead of working on melting whatever's in your stomach. That's why snacking is really not good for you.
I'm sure. Wait, snacking? What's... I'm not supposed to snack either?
Well, if you eat the right food, you shouldn't want a snack. I'm not telling you if you're hungry, don't eat. I'm saying if you ate, if your smoothie worked for you when you broke your fast, you shouldn't want any more food until dinner. You just like, you could snack, but you don't want to.
I think you guys know this, but in case you don't, my happy place is on the beach. Actually, that's not enough. My happy place is on the beach with an iced coffee in my hand. What a vibe. There are a lot of beaches out there, but there's only one people call the beach. Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, is made up of 14 coastal communities and 60 miles of sunny beaches. Together, they create a place that makes you feel like you belong. Shine and dine in a foodie haven with oceanfront patios, fresh seafood, low country classics, and southern favorites. Plus, my favorite, you can listen to live music any day of the year, outside at laid-back beach bars, at world-renowned theaters, or right on the boardwalk. You belong at Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Plan your trip to the beach at visitmyrtlebeach.com. Look, everyone knows that toilet paper is not created equal. Not all rolls are the same. Some are too soft. Some, can we say, sort of crumble, if you know what I'm saying. Then other toilet paper is so strong that it can actually hurt. And let's not even talk about the toilet paper that is so thin, it doesn't get the job done. Angel Soft is soft and strong and always affordable. Come on, life is too short. There's too much going on. I don't want to have to overthink this. So pick up a pack of Angel Soft in the toilet paper aisle of your nearest retailer. That's Angel Soft, soft and strong. Simple.
The gut is having a moment. It is a very interesting time, an exciting time to be a gastroenterologist, because we are finally figuring out that your gut is an engine for your entire body, and it controls so much going on in your body, in your brain, your hormones, your immune system. So while the gastrointestinal tract, the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestine, the colon, the liver, the pancreas, while that's really my domain, I consider gut health really whole body health, because of the fact that the gut is feeding all these other organs and has such a profound influence on them. I went to, I trained at great places, Yale, Columbia, Mount Sinai. I didn't understand it either until like a decade of being a doctor. I mean, I understood gut health, don't get me wrong, but that gut immune connection, because in medical school, you learn about the immune system as a sort of ethereal thing. It's these, immune cells floating around, and, where are they? Well, it turns out that about 70 to 80% of your immune system is actually in your gut. And so in the gut, we have this razor thin gut lining. It's literally one cell thick. And on one side, we have the trillions of microbes, not just bacteria, but also viral organisms, parasites, fungal organisms, all kinds of different microbes. Although when we talk about the microbiome, we're mostly talking about bacteria. But on one side of the gut lining, you have the microbes. And on the other side of this razor-thin lining, we have the immune cells. And they are in constant conversation. They are literally, it's this hand-in-glove relationship. And so, for example, if there is a bad player in the gut, let's say Ebola gets into your body and Ebola is traveling through your gut, those microbes send a message to the immune cells on the other side. And in some cases, it's a physical message. They literally press on the gut lining to say, hey, there's a bad player in here. You guys need to take care of this. You need to do something. So they send a signal. Sometimes it's a chemical signal, sometimes it's literally like a kick in the pants of the gut lining. And the immune cells then start to make antibodies. They do all their different things. They release cytokines to handle the problem. So the microbes are like the lookout on one side of the gut lining. And again, there's this constant interaction. So when I describe that to you, you start to see how, if the microbiome is messed up and you don't have enough of those lookout cells or things are disturbed, or if your gut lining is compromised, that signaling with the immune system is not going to take place properly. And when we think about immune disorders, think about the millions of people with autoimmune disorders. 1 in 4 Americans have an autoimmune disorder. I have a couple.
Wow.
I have urticaria and eczema. Many of my patients have Crohn's plus psoriasis plus something else. And what an autoimmune disease is, it means that your immune system is overreacting to your body's normal tissue. Of course, my autoimmune diseases are well controlled because I have figured out what is the connection between what's going on in my gut and my immune system. But it is still the set of diseases that I love to treat in patients because a gut-focused approach to your immune system works so successfully for so many people. And also, you don't rely on those immune suppressing drugs. So for autoimmune diseases, typically what we do is we give people drugs like steroids or biologics that quiet down their immune system. And these drugs can be incredible and life-changing and really get disease under control. But unfortunately, when you suppress the immune system, now you have to deal with things like cancer and infection. So figuring out what is going on in the gut, and it's not always just the gut. There are other factors, genetic, environmental, besides what's going on in your gut. But it's a huge factor, Rachel, for most people with autoimmune disease. And when you can figure out how to bring that immune response down, but not so low that now you're immunocompromised. So you want that Goldilocks immune system that's just right, that's going to react enough to clear the virus, but not, that's still going to be able to mount that immune response, but not react so much that you're going to end up destroying tissue and having rheumatoid arthritis or Crohn's or psoriasis or eczema or any one of these over 100 different autoimmune diseases that people struggle with. And the thing that I most want people to know is that having a healthy gut lining, and we can just say what we're talking about. Leaky gut is what most people know this as, which is an increase in permeability in your gut lining. Your gut lining is porous. It's like a fishing net. But we want those holes to stay small. We don't want big holes in the net because now things can get through that shouldn't normally get through. And just like a fishing net, that means things can pass through both ways. Things can get through your gut into your body. Things can get from your body into your gut. And so we want, just like the Goldilocks immune system, we want the Goldilocks gut lining not too permeable. And the most important thing I want people to understand is that an increase in gut permeability, leaky gut, as most people would recognize it, is more about something you're doing that's messing up your gut lining than it is about a pill you're going to take to fix it. I see so many supplements on the market, whether it's zinc or glutamine or whatever it is, and people think that they can take a pill and just zip up that gut lining and presto. No, you have to look at the ultra-processed food you're eating, all the emulsifiers, the carrageenan, the soy lecithin, the guar gum. And unfortunately, sometimes when people are trying to make what they think is a healthier choice, so they're going from cow's milk to a plant milk, but they're drinking a plant milk that's full of these emulsifiers. And what we have seen is that emulsifiers and preservatives in food literally mess up that gut lining. They interfere with the microbiome also. They can disrupt the gut lining. And so when we look at the data on ultra-processed foods, it's not just gut problems we see. We are seeing dementia and neurocognitive problems. We're seeing an increased risk of premature death. And we are now in the US up to more than 55% of the calories we consume are from ultra-processed foods.
Whoa.
So it's crazy, right? And, I look around at the obesity epidemic. I look around at the autoimmune epidemic. I look around at the ADD epidemic, the mental health, all of it. And I look at what people are eating.
Yes.
So much of what people are
1,000,000%.
eating is not food. It's edible food-like substances. It is, food-derived bioingredients. I remember doing a little post a year or so ago I was reading this granola bar, the ingredients, and I read some stuff and it was like bioengineered ingredients. And I said, listen, we can make car tires from corn, but car tires are not food. So food-derived ingredients are not food. And I still love Michael Pollan's food rules are still fantastic. Like 5 or fewer ingredients, don't eat food your grandmother or grandfather would not have recognized as food. And if it's not in your pantry or kitchen, then you probably shouldn't be eating it. If you're seeing something, sodium pyrophosphate, that should be in the chemistry lab. That is not a food ingredient. That is a bio-derived food ingredient. So, people talk about the screens and all these different things, and sure, all of it, but the food is a huge one. And so
absolutely,
in terms of leaky gut, we really have to look at the food we're eating. Alcohol is another thing that disrupts the gut lining. There are some things that are beyond our control. Some people have had radiation, for example, for cancer, and radiation can damage a gut lining. But the things that we're ingesting would be the food, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So those are things that contain ibuprofen. That's your Advil, your Anacin, your Aleve, your Naprosyn, even your regular aspirin. Literally make holes in the gut lining. Every time I am on call at the hospital, I am getting a call from the intensive care unit or the emergency room. We have somebody with a bleeding ulcer. You need to come down here and scope them. And we have had multiple cases of fatal bleeding from ulcers in the GI tract from NSAIDs. In fact, NSAID use, I believe, in the medical literature is the most common cause of blood loss from the gastrointestinal tract.
What's NSAID? What's that?
NSAIDs are non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So those are things that have ibuprofen in them. And I remember when I met my husband it's been about 24 years ago, he used to take Advil, cold and sinus, literally every day. And I would be like, why are you taking that? And he's like, yeah, well, I have a head cold or I have sinus infection or, my sinuses are bothering me. And I was like, yeah, I am in the hospital trying to save somebody's life who's bleeding to death from these drugs and not meaning to single out any one medication. These drugs can be life-altering and life-changing for people with chronic inflammatory conditions. But we have to understand that we can't just sort of pop these things willy-nilly every time we have an ache and pain because they're really problematic for the gut. So when I do an endoscopy on someone and I look down into their stomach with my endoscope and I see an ulcer is essentially a hole in the gut lining. So that's a macroscopic, that's like a big picture view of a hole. But these drugs also cause tiny erosions and more microscopic damage to the gut lining. So non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs are a big one. And I always avoid these things. I usually would take them only at like mile 20 of a marathon where I'm like, oh my God, my knees I can't. I have no, cartilage in my knee and I'll be crawling on my hands and knees. I would usually take them rare occasions. And I remember in 2017, I was snowboarding and I tore my MCL, my medial collateral ligament. And I was in such pain. And I was on a trip, it was actually a work trip in Utah. And I couldn't get back on the plane because I couldn't bend my knee. I couldn't move my knee. It was so painful. So of course my husband reaches in his toiletry kit. He has tons of this stuff. And he's like, here, take some of this stuff. And I'm like, oh no, I don't take that. That stuff can ruin your gut. It's terrible. He's like, you need to get on the plane. You need to take this. I took 2 ibuprofen and I was like, this is magic. This is crazy. Like pain gone. I mean, I wasn't quite dancing down the aisles, and I kept saying to myself, this cannot be good for you. Like, anything that works this well, we need to really, reconsider this. So I want to be cognizant of the fact that many people live in chronic pain. Many people have inflammatory conditions where they literally cannot move without being in severe pain. And these drugs can take that away and they can help them have a more normal lifestyle. And I completely acknowledge that. But I want to say for the average person who's not dealing with that, who maybe has a headache because they didn't drink enough water, or they stayed up too late watching the presidential debate and they, are now feeling tired, you have to really do that risk-benefit analysis in your mind. And I think we in the medical community as physicians, we have to do a better job informing people. And not just, a pill for every ill, because it's from the top down. We tell people, it's magic. Medicine is the new magic. You don't have to be uncomfortable. Just, take this pill. So non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, diet, alcohol, radiation, we don't usually have control over that. A really interesting one, Rachel, is stress. We know that stress can dramatically affect the microbiome. There's a famous set of studies done where they looked at college students before an exam, and they found that acute stress, you're about to walk into your biochemistry exam, whatever it is, can increase levels of pathogenic bacteria 1,000-fold in an hour. Isn't that crazy?
Wow, that's crazy.
1,000-fold. And so stress, we know, can dramatically affect the microbiome, but it can also affect that gut lining. And we can't always control a stressful situation. We, may have to take that biochemistry exam, but really focusing again on mind-body techniques and what you can do to sort of trigger your body's parasympathetic rest and digest response and bring down that sympathetic response is so helpful. And it's not just sort of how you feel above, for the neck above, but it's how you feel in your body also. It has a very real and profound effect. So these are some of the common things. Antibiotics obviously are terrible for the gut microbiome, and it's really hard to undo some of that damage. So people are frequently asking me, what's the magic supplement and the special prebiotic or probiotic or postbiotic, or, what's the pill? And really what I encourage people to do is to take a careful look in their medicine cabinet, a careful look in their pantry, a careful look at their lifestyle and how they're handling stress, because these are the things that can really improve what's going on in their gut.
The mental health field has long been divided into two camps of people, largely. So one camp believes that mental illnesses, things like schizophrenia or bipolar or depression or ADHD or anxiety, or even post-traumatic stress disorder. One camp of people, they're often considered biological psychiatrists, and they largely will argue that mental illnesses are chemical imbalances of the brain. And that explanation is based on neurotransmitters, and that explanation leads to treatments. And most of those treatments are, in fact, pills that are targeting chemical imbalances or neurotransmitter imbalances. So pills that are helping boost serotonin levels or blocking dopamine levels or boosting dopamine levels or, changing norepinephrine levels. The warring camp with those biological psychiatrists are the people who say, no, mental illnesses are psychological and social problems, that they are due to trauma, stress, adversity. And the best treatment is to talk to people. The best people is safety. The best people, are just pragmatic, obvious social interventions. If somebody's being abused or traumatized or tormented, that needs to stop. And that is the treatment. If somebody is being bullied and teased on the playground, the solution is obvious. Stop the bullying and teasing. Let's have anti-bullying campaigns in the schools. And if we just could get rid of all of this trauma and abuse and adversity, mental illness would, by and large, just go away. And then there's always been a large cohort of mental health clinicians who are it's kind of both. It's kind of both of those things. And They can vary for different people in different ways. So there's always been a large cohort of people in the both camp, and I have largely considered myself in that both camp. I think that when push comes to shove, when people would ask me, Dr. Palmer, what is causing the bipolar disorder in my son? Or why am I so chronically depressed? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with my brain? Like, I know something's wrong. This is not who I am. This isn't who I want to be. I don't know what's wrong with me. I just can't snap out of this. I just can't stop being depressed. When patients would ask me those questions, very early in my career, I would give them answers like chemical imbalances and trauma and stress. But more often than not, those answers were always insufficient, because as soon as somebody started saying, but how, but why not someone else? My brother was also traumatized and he's fine, but I'm not. How does that work? Why is he okay and I'm not okay? If it really is a chemical imbalance, Dr. Palmer, why aren't the pills working? These pills are supposed to work. They're not working. What's going on? At some point, I got to the point in my career where I recognized we as a field do not have answers. We don't know the details of these chemical imbalances. We don't know the details of how trauma and stress result in sometimes debilitating, severe mental illnesses. And largely that left me as a clinician, and more importantly, it just left the entire mental health field in a precarious position of desperately wanting to help people, but really knowing that the tools that we have, the treatments that we're offering, fail to work for far too many people. And we just don't know. That's the real answer. We just don't know. The brain is a complicated organ. That's what I always told myself. That's what a lot of people tell themselves. The brain is a complicated organ. We're just a long way away from figuring it out. And everybody's doing their best. Don't be blaming or shaming anybody, whether it's the patients or the researchers or the clinicians. Like, everybody's doing their best. And this is just a really complex problem and no one can figure it out. What I now believe is profoundly different than all of that. It includes all of that. Everything that I've just said is all true and it remains true. And yes, neurotransmitters do play a role in mental illness. And yes, medications can work for a lot of people. What I believe now doesn't take anything away from that. Trauma and stress and adversity can lead to mental illness. But what I am proposing now is that we can actually put together all of the science that has been accumulated over the last 100 years, but in particular, some cutting edge science that has only come to light over the last 20 years, really. And we're learning new stuff every day. And if we put all of that science together and we kind of lay out this puzzle and see how can we fit all of these pieces of the puzzle together, I believe once and for all, we are at an inflection point in the mental health field where we can actually begin to put the pieces of the puzzle together. We can actually begin to understand what is happening in the brain. Why are the neurotransmitters imbalanced? How does trauma and stress result in mental illness? And when you see that big picture, you're led to this soundbite conclusion that mental disorders are metabolic disorders affecting the brain. And when you really understand the details of that, the solutions can sometimes become obvious. When I was led to that, there's a lot of neuroscience literature published on how the ketogenic diet can stop seizures. And as I started exploring that literature, I started realizing very quickly as a psychiatrist, wait, all this stuff that they're talking about is highly relevant to psychiatry. These are the same brain things, that brain changes or brain abnormalities or brain differences that we see in people with a wide range of mental illnesses, including schizophrenia and depression and bipolar, And so as a scientist, I quickly started realizing, wait, this is so obvious why it's working. And why hasn't somebody else figured this out? It's so clear and obvious. And in many ways, it is obvious. We use epilepsy treatments in millions of people for psychiatric conditions. A lot of the pills that we prescribe in psychiatry are actually epilepsy medicines. Literally, we use them in tens of millions of people. So things like benzodiazepines, like Xanax and Klonopin and Valium, those are actually seizure medicines, believe it or not. Things like Topamax or Lamictal or Depakote or Tegretol, if you've heard of any of those things, or Neurontin or Gabapentin, if you've heard of any of those are all seizure medicines. Now, most people don't know them as seizure medicines. They think that they're psychiatric medicines, but they're really seizure medicines, but we use them in psychiatry. So the fact that this diet can stop seizures, it's kind of like a no-brainer that we can use it for people with mental health conditions too.
When you found out about this, so I'm talking to you gives me too many questions in my brain to follow up on. But when you found out about this, I'm curious. No, I love it. Are you kidding? This is my dream. Have you tried keto? Like, did you go, okay, I'm going to experiment on myself, and how does this help with mental clarity? And like, do I feel better? Did you test on yourself?
So I had actually tested it on myself over 25 years ago. And that was actually the very first foray into it for me, is that we can talk about it if you want. We don't have to talk about it. But I have a long sob story about my own life. But I had OCD as a kid. My mother had a horrible psychotic illness when I was in high school. She and I end up homeless together. I become depressed and suicidal, and I had chronic depression, chronic suicidality. And when I was in my 20s, I actually got diagnosed with metabolic syndrome, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, prediabetes. And I ended up going on what essentially was a ketogenic diet to see if it could help address some of my metabolic syndrome so that I didn't have to go on medicines. Lo and behold, it worked. It worked for my metabolic syndrome. I reversed that, all of it. But the thing that I noticed was that it dramatically improved my mental health. I felt so much better. The lingering depression that I still had completely went away. The lingering OCD symptoms that I still had went away. My mood, energy, everything just got better. And that started me on a path to using this treatment in patients with depression. But for years, I went more than probably 10 or 15 years thinking that this is just an antidepressant. You know, the keto diet is really controversial. A lot of people hate it. People call it a quack diet or dangerous. So I was like, I'm not really interested in going public with this. I'm going to mind my own business, do my thing. I was using it with some patients who were interested in using it. And sometimes it was having remarkable results for them too. But I wasn't ready to go public about it because I thought, well, it's just an antidepressant effect. And I don't know, that doesn't seem that important. When I saw it stop the hallucinations and delusions of schizophrenia, that's when I recognized, like, I have a moral obligation to share this with the world. There are so many people desperate for better mental health treatments. And they've tried everything and nothing's working. Like, I can't keep this to myself anymore. I have to share this with the world.
The Rachel Hollis Podcast is produced by me, Rachel Hollis. It's edited by Andrew Weller and Jack Noble. Don't miss Grand Slam deals going on now at Academy Sports and Outdoors from March 3rd to March 16th. If you are a sports mom like I am, this is the time of year to get the deals. Get up to 50% off bats, gloves, and training gear from brands like Rawlings, Easton, Wilson, Marucci, Louisville Slugger, and more. Need it fast? Choose same-day delivery powered by DoorDash. Order by 4 p.m., get it by 8 p.m. Shop your local Academy store or academy.com.
TaxAct knows filing your taxes can be complicated, and that's why we have live experts to help you with any questions. They can hold your hand through the process beginning to end. Metaphorically, of course. I mean, they can't actually hold your hand in person. I suppose you could hold your computer mouse while you chat with the expert about capital gains or whatever, which is sort of like holding hands. Sorry, point is, our tax experts can make filing easier. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.